Welcome to the Best Music Podcast, where we see behind the curtain and discover the hidden habits and success secrets of noteworthy music makers so you can speed up your journey to your dream music goals by taking what you need from their wins and lessons learned along the way. I'm your host, Dan Spencer, and this week's featured guest is Jim McCarty. Now, besides being the drummer for the legendary classic rock band, the Yardbirds, a rock and roll Hall of Famer and all-around awesome music maker, Jim has been involved in many projects such as, brace for this, ladies and gentlemen, because we're about to go on a ride, Together, Renaissance, Shoot, Illusion, Ruthless Blues, Box of Frogs, Stairway and Stern, British Invasion All-Stars, Topham Band, Pretty Things, / YARDBIRDS Blues Band, Jim McCarty Band, MCCARTY HITE Project, PILGRIM, MELTDOWN, the YARDBIRDS Experience, and many others. As a songwriter, singer, performing as an acoustic rhythm guitarist and keyboardist, acting at times even as a producer, as well as more recently launching his own solo career. His latest single, Breath of the Wind, is available now at jimmccarty.co.uk. That's JIMMCCARTY.co.uk. Jim, thank you so very much for taking time out of your day to come hang with us here on the Best Music Podcast.
My pleasure, Dan. My pleasure. Lovely to be here.
Jim, you are such a gentleman and not at all what someone might think of when we think of a 60s rock star who was literally in the room creating psychedelic classic rock. Like, literally the first frontline level creative. And there's no tie-dye. There's no bandanas. Jim, tell us about how you have evolved and how you have stayed true to yourself through this incredible ride of a career that you've had.
Well, I don't know how I've done it, but I must have had some help along the way. Because, yes, it's been a very long career, but I think I was very, I'm very thankful about it, you know, that I've managed to survive in a rocky sort of business, and I've done so many projects, as you say, you know, and it's one thing has led to another, and it's been very interesting.
What about gratitude do you find to be so important in terms of keeping your feet on the ground, in terms of keeping moving forward?
Well, I've learned that's a very helpful thing to be, you know, to keep your heart open, you know. Even though I might have made a few errors along the way, you know, made a wrong decision or something, I might have been in Led Zeppelin for all I know, but you know, that might have been an error. But in the long run, I accept everything I've done, and I'm very happy. I'm still involved.
In the times when you might be on your way to feeling some sort of regret, do you stop yourself and say to yourself, Jim, let's think about this in a way where I'm going to be grateful? What do you do for yourself? Is there a prompt? How do you go about framing things with the lens of gratitude?
I've done quite a bit of work on myself, to be honest. So that's how I survive. And yeah, sometimes I might feel quite miserable about something, but then I have to say, well, let's get this in proportion, you know, let me look at it another way, really. Let me get behind what's going on, and that's what I'm learning. And I was just 80 last month. So
happy birthday, congratulations.
So I mean, it's taken me a while to learn these things.
I think we are all slower learners than we would like, especially when it comes to changing things about ourselves. That's certainly, I think, a universal thing.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed for me since my wife passed. You know, she died about 3 years ago, and this is really what the song's about: communicating with her. And it was obviously a great shock, but having to deal with that, I seem to have made certain inroads into a different way of thinking, and managed to cope. And it's been quite a revelation in some ways. It's been quite strengthening.
Obviously, so very sorry for your loss. I cannot even imagine what that would be like, and I'm very, very sorry for your loss. Can you tell us a little bit? You say you feel strengthened. You've found inroads to new ways of thinking. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. It took me a while, and I had to do some work. I had to really investigate what might have happened to her, and I thought, well, she must be somewhere, she can't just disappear. And we were very close, and so I first of all I looked at YouTube videos of near-death experiences and all that stuff, and I studied someone called Eben Alexander that talks a lot about all this stuff, who's an actual brain surgeon, and he had a near-death experience himself, and he said, well, I was totally out of it. My brain was dead. Yeah, I was somewhere else. I remember it, and I can tell the story. So I got into that, and then I got into mediumship with somebody called Suzanne Giesman, who's not that far away from you, actually. She's in Carolina, I think. I studied her, and I did some courses, and I managed to learn a way of communicating with my wife, which was amazing. It was very simple, and I was picking up stuff. And it's been growing and growing, and I've been picking up little things that she says, and little bits of evidence which are very interesting. Things that I wouldn't know about something else. She tells me, and she even told me about Charlie Watts, and I had no idea he was even ill. And Charlie Watts came into my mind when I was communicating with her, and then a few weeks later I saw that he died. So that was a complete shock, but very interesting to find out that way. And the more I've gone on, the more I've realised that consciousness does carry on after we die. And that we're not finished, and we carry on in some form or other. I don't know all the answers, but I know that nobody ever really dies, and also it doesn't appear to be like a horrible place to go when you die. You're not going to go and be judged and burnt at the stake or whatever. It could be absolutely sounds. Some of the reports I've heard, it sounds wonderful. So I think most of our loved ones are actually thriving where they are, and we don't realise that. And once we know that, it feels better to think, oh, well, she's thriving, rather than lying in bed dying of cancer. Which is it's a much nicer thought for me. So all those sort of things have helped me get to the way I think now,
There is so much that we have yet to understand about the way intuition works, about the way the universe is connected. I mean, you look at quantum physics, and it's like a particle's in two different places at the same time, but it's not really there. It's like there's so much that we have yet to explore and understand, and it is fascinating that you are finding these independent connections, which might seem independent, from an outside observer, that you're able to put pieces together and find these through lines with what's happening in your life and with what's happening in the world in this way. And you express some of this in your new release, which I fortunately was able to listen to. And in addition to some of the most emotive and cathartic string arrangements I've heard accompanying a song for quite some time, you really talk about finding these moments, these connections where you are reminded or you see parts of your wife and different things. Could you talk a little bit about translating this journey you've been on and bringing it into the musical world and what that's meant for you and what that experience has been like?
Yes, well, the first thing is I spoke about Suzanne Giesman, who I studied, and I did manage to get a session with her, which is could be quite difficult. Some people are waiting for years, to get a session, and so I did manage a session, and of course she picked up my wife, and my wife said, "Oh, he's written a song for me." So Suzanne said, "Oh, well, to me, I want to hear that song." So I sent her a rough demo of it, and she said, "Oh, well, I get it totally. It's great. It's wonderful lyrics." Because I was talking, in a poetic way about, what it's like to communicate, and the fact that it seems like she's everywhere. That's in the lyric, and and I've got to go up a stage in order to get there into that state to communicate. So all that's in the lyrics. And then it was like a synchronicity with the arrangement, because I'd worked with Hugh Syme before, and Hugh's famous for doing more record covers. He's more of a record cover artist. But he did some arrangements for me on an album called Walking in the Wildland that I did, which was my last solo album. And I got on very well. And I sent this demo song over to him, which I'd done locally with my friend here in the little village. And I didn't get it back for ages. He just said, "Oh, it's a lovely song, I'll get round to it when I get my equipment going." And then about 18 months later, suddenly he sends it back and says, "Oh, here we are. I've worked on the songs. What do you think?" So I thought, wow, this is great. This is great. So I sent it to the producer, and it's actually been very easy for me. It all flowed really beautifully.
Speaking of flowing and universal connections, throughout your career, you have played so many different genres, sang, written, created, and genre at that point almost starts to melt away. It just becomes about the feeling. But at this higher level, what's something that you have found to be true across all the music genres and all the styles and all the instruments that you have played? What's one thing that has been true for you?
Yeah, good question. I'd say one thing that's been very important is that working in a team works really well. And when I've been in a team of musicians, that's always been very creative for me. Particularly the Yardbirds and Renaissance, which were the most successful. The Yardbirds were always a team, even with Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck. In the end, they sort of worked through that team situation and became solo artists, as they should be, and but they were all part of the team, and that's what I would say to anyone aspiring now. It's very difficult to do it on your own. I think it's good to have other people to work with and bounce ideas off, and work like that really with other musicians.
What are a couple tips you would have for someone in terms of how to be a good teammate and how to be a good musical collaborator?
Well, I'd say, if you can get on for a start, and if you can listen to people and honor other people, and you're not very egocentric about what you're doing, and you're happy to collaborate, I think, because I think it's difficult for some people. They can't collaborate, and I've seen a lot of people like that haven't really done very well because the ego's got in the way, But I think, on the other hand, a lot of people do well with the right people, and they attract the right people as well. They're in that sort of mindset.
You said something which is interesting and which I've read in doing research. I read in a couple different places, and you just hinted in it in your answer just then. You said, well, Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck went on to become solo artists as they should have. Can you talk a little bit about your philosophy around that answer and that framing of that? Because it's a very interesting way of saying that.
Well, as they should have, because they were that talented to be able to do that. Not necessarily every great guitar player does that. I think they should have done it because they had difficulty in a team in the end. They weren't really team players. They were happy in the team at the beginning. But it really came out that they weren't a team player. And I think somebody said, I don't know whether it was maybe Brian May said, oh, there's some guitarists that are great in a team, like Keith Richards, for instance. He's fine in the Stones. And others, like Clapton and Beck, that are completely... no good after a while. They're okay. They were okay to start, but of course, after a while, they became too proficient, and they realised. So it's a different way of thinking.
It is a different way of thinking. Do you think we could also attribute that to perhaps? And we'll get off this subject in a moment because I'm sure you've talked about this in a million interviews and it's been done so many times. I just one more, if you will humor me. One more is: do you suppose we could also say that for someone like Clapton and someone like Beck, there's this singular artistic vision of what should be, in their subjective opinion, artistically, of what should be, and to be on a team, you have to be open to what could be as opposed to what should be?
I think that's right in a way. Yes. Yes, I think Clapton was very much like that because he was very into the blues and very into a very sort of rigid way of doing it. Whereas Jeff was totally different. He was just playing off the top of his head. But he obviously had a vision, because he was always very. It was always very high quality. It had to be the best quality possible in the equipment and in the musicians. And of course, he's played with so many brilliant musicians, through the years.
So let's back off of things I'm sure you've talked about many times in interviews, and let me ask you a slightly different question, which is, what is your favorite story from your career that no one ever asks about?
Oh, that's a difficult one. That means I haven't talked about it before. My favourite story, I've no idea. My favourite story was probably at the very beginning of when I first started to play. was I was in a little school group, and it was sort of cliche, really, because we went and played in a holiday camp down in Cornwall, which is in the west of England, and there were just like 3 or 4 of us in the group, and I think the guitar player's mother arranged it because she worked in the holiday camp. It was some sort of funny Butlins type of place, and so we all went down on the train from London, and I had to take all the drum kit I had to take on the train. So it's so bizarre, walking on the train with the whole drum kit. Somebody was helping me, obviously. I don't remember who, but it's so funny when you think, I got in the train with the drums and put them in the cargo or whatever it was. So I haven't told that story before.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that here. So it was a summer gig down in Cornwall, which is sort of a vacation spot in the summer for people in Great Britain, especially in England. And so you go down and you take your drums on the train and you set up. And so what are you playing every night? Are you playing in the afternoon, evening? What happened next?
Well, we used to play in the bar in the evenings. Yeah, but we worked as well. The thing is, we worked during the day. We worked our sort of keep and worked in the kitchen. So we washed up, and put food on plates and all this sort of stuff. And then in the evening, we played music in the bar. I think that was like every evening. Well, we played
Wow.
we played whatever it was.
You just doing like the top hits of the day, just like covers, just showing up and just doing the dance hall maybe stuff at that time?
Yeah, it was things like something like Sweet Georgia Brown or something like that, Da 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 da. Sort of jazz pop. Something quite bizarre. Those sort of things. And a bit of skiffle. Skiffle was big in those days.
I have never heard of skiffle, Jim. What is skiffle?
Skiffle was it was really made famous by someone called Lonnie Donegan, and he sort of did a lot of it was I think he based a lot of his stuff on Woody Guthrie. So it was sort of folk music, but they had a washboard and a very sort of basic sort of bass. I can't remember what the bass. I'm sure skiffle fans will know exactly what I mean. But they had a particular bass which was just one string, I think.
On like the broom handle where you'd pull it back to change the pitch. Yeah, okay.
It. Yeah, that's it. And skiffle and a washboard, where you wash the clothes. Yeah, that's it. And so that was skiffle, and of course the acoustic guitar playing the chords. So now you know skiffle, Dan.
Wow. Jim, you have thoroughly educated me on the art of skiffle, which is interesting. Yeah, I would have think it's almost like folk music on the same in the same car as like a bluegrass band, but the folk music wins, and it's just the bass player and the percussion player from the bluegrass band stayed, and everyone else left, and then the bass player and the percussion. I was like, well, I guess we're playing folk music now.
Yes, that's right. Yes, do you know Hilton Valentine? He's died now, but he was in the Animals. The Animals.
Oh, for sure, yes.
House of the Rising Sun. So he played the chords on House of the Rising Sun. He was a guitar player, but he recently, I mean, he died a few years ago, but he had a band called Skiffle Dog. And he had his wife was playing the washboard, and he was playing skiffle songs.
That's amazing. Man, speaking of bands like the Animals, I was reading about, interestingly, the drummer from the Monkees, and his name is escaping me right now. They were a TV band. None of them could play. And so
yes.
they were like going out. They were going out and doing gigs and then hopping on the train and coming back to London to like take music lessons. And then getting back on the train and going out to play.
Probably, yes. That was that Mike Nesmith?
Insanity.
Mike Nesmith was the drummer.
Oh, fantastic! The name thoroughly escapes me at the moment, but I'm glad. Okay, so you're playing skiffle, you're playing some jazz pop, you're down in Cornwall. You stay there for the whole summer?
Yes, yes.
And then drums back on the train?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And then back to school. I think we were still at school. So we were back to school in September, you know.
Jim, can you tell us about the way your fellow British countrymen, can you tell us about the way they looked at you on the train when you were bringing those drums on and off?
Probably complete disgust, you know. Oh, what's this guy doing with those drums? You know, what's he doing? He must be a dropout. But of course, it was a precursor to the Yardbirds, because the Yardbirds used to go on trains, didn't they? And travel everywhere on a train.
So when you were traveling everywhere on the train with the Yardbirds, was it the same idea? Did you have a smaller kit? Like now some guys will like take their floor tom. They'll take the floor tom, put it on the floor, put their kick pedal on the floor tom, just have a snare and the hi-hat, and that's it. So did you ever think about downsizing your kit, or was it always the full thing?
No, it was sort of downsized when I first played, because I couldn't afford to buy a whole kit, so I had a very small kit. I think it costs like £10 or something, and then it got bigger and bigger. No, but the actual Yardbirds themselves, we didn't travel on trains very much. Yeah, this was before the Yardbirds I'm talking about. This is when we were still at school.
Ah, okay.
With the school band.
And so, Jim, you're going around in the school band, you're going on trains. How important do you think it is for people, regardless of whether they want to become a professional or not, to start playing music early?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we loved the early rock and roll music, you know, from America, Buddy Holly and the Crickets and Gene Vincent and all that stuff. We loved it, Everly Brothers, and we used to play that at school when we were in the school group, and we used to play in the school dances. That's another cliche, you know. We'd play in the interval, and everyone would go crazy. But
so, Jim, what is the interval in a dance?
You know, they'd have a band playing sort of dance music like foxtrots and waltzes. You know, a regular band, and then we'd go on in when they had a break and play for about 20 minutes. You know, da 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 da.
And so you'd be doing like the Chuck Berry stuff. Yeah. You'd be doing the rock. And
yeah.
so everyone would get a chance to like go a little crazy.
Yeah, they did it in a movie, didn't they? Well, Back to the Future, didn't he do it in Back to the Future?
Yes.
That's it. That was exactly it.
That's amazing. Oh, it's incredible. The real life Back to the Future. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible. So, as you move forward in your career, do you happen to remember the first time you ever wrote your own song?
Yes. Well, we wrote together, and actually, funny enough, my first song, because I was, I could write, but I couldn't play any. I could only play the drums, but I had like stuff in my head. And the first song I wrote was, I think I wrote it with Paul Samwell-Smith, the bass player, and it was called "He's Always There," and it was on one of our albums, Roger the Engineer, and it got used sort of vaguely recently, about 10 years ago, by the Pussycat Dolls, and they used it in one of their songs, and they made it into something about "When I Grow Up." Do you know that song, "When I Grow Up"? They sampled our song and used it in this song "When I Grow Up," and that was like my first song, and it was like a huge hit. Amazing, isn't it?
That's incredible. I was listening to the Engineer album today. It was wild stuff. Long album too. There was like over 20 tracks.
Oh yes. Which one was it?
Roger the Engineer.
Oh, that was that one. Yes. Yeah, we had
Long
a lot
album.
of fun.
That was amazing.
We had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah, it sounded like it.
Yeah, not only was there a song, but I did a whole book with Dave Thompson, that lives in your neck of the woods, Dan, who's a rock and roll writer, and we all really wrote a book which was called "Nobody Told Me," which was more or less my autobiography. And when it came to a book about the supernatural, I didn't think Dave was going to be interested, but it was another synchronicity. He suddenly emailed me and said, "How are you doing?" And I rang him up and I said, "Oh, do you fancy doing this book about me communicating with my wife?" And he said, yes, I'm really interested in all that. So I was really pleased, and we had a lot of good fun doing that. And so that was about 2 or 3 years ago. And She Walks in Beauty, it's called.
And She Walks in Beauty is available. It's going to be in the show notes if you're on audio, and we'll have the link also in the video description if you're watching this on YouTube. So go ahead and check down there. You can find links both to Jim's website and to check out both of his books. We'll put links in there for everyone to go check out.
Thank you.
So Jim, tell us a little bit about the process for writing a book. Is it equally as creatively fulfilling for you as creating music, or is it somehow different?
Well, it's different. It's quite different. With this book, it was like Dave was doing an interview with me. It's almost like he was saying, "Oh, so what happened then, and what's next?" And so he was leading it, and he's a very good writer. He's an accomplished writer. So he was getting all the facts out of me, and I went back, to previous supernatural experiences I had, years ago. So I talked about my past as well. It was good fun because I sent him lots and lots of info, and he put it all together. So, God bless him.
Well, Jim, would you mind terribly sharing one, perhaps if you would, shocking or notable supernatural experience that you have had?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I've had a few. I was reading a book one night. This is years ago with my first wife, and I was reading a book about the afterlife and all that. I think I must have been about 25 or something, and I went to sleep, and I was sort of drifting off, and all of a sudden this sort of face started to appear. It was almost like you know, if there was a piece of glass, I think there was a movie where this happened. It was like a piece of glass and somebody was drawing this face on it, and it started to appear to me, you know, very slowly, and I thought, oh my God, what is this? What is this? And I didn't really want to know, so it didn't really carry on. I saw that, and it was a bit like a sort of a bit like a native Indian person, and then it stopped and it went away, and I sort of I don't know. I didn't sleep very well, but I didn't need to sleep. I got up in the morning, and I'd been totally energized, and it was a complete mystery. I didn't know what it was. I don't even know what it was now. You know, it was a definite, and I've never actually seen anything again since. That was the only time.
Well, Jim, please excuse this question, but I have to ask, I feel morally obligated to ask this next question. Being literally one of the premier pioneers of psychedelic rock, I've got to ask, had you perhaps ingested some chemical substance in the hours leading up to this experience that might have served as a catalyst for you to see faces appearing in front of you as you fell asleep?
No, good thinking, but I promise you there was nothing, no substances, absolutely nothing, not even a beer.
Not even a beer. Not even a beer. Jim, will you permit me 2 more questions to ask you this evening?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. First question is, what is the greatest lesson you have learned, either in your career or in life, that you would like for people to hear so that they can save themselves the time and the effort of learning that lesson as well?
Well, I said it already, didn't I? To be thankful to things, and grateful, you know, grateful for friends, and grateful for things that happen, and thankful that people are still paying me royalties, and you know, thankful for people like you that still want to talk to me. Thank you, Dan.
Jim, you're amazing. You're awesome. All right. Last question, if you're game.
Go on then.
Okay. What is a piece or the premier piece of advice you would give, besides finding a team, that you would give to someone who's starting out in music? Or maybe they've been doing music for a little while and they're stuck, you know, but they're towards the beginning part of their journey. What's a piece of advice you would like to give to someone like that?
Just to be patient, and don't give up. Keep at it, and don't lose heart. Don't lose faith. Just be patient with things, and if they're meant to be doing it, that'll happen for them. Just hang on in there, as they say.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Jim McCarty, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, drummer of the legendary classic rock band The Yardbirds. His latest single, Breath of the Wind, is available now at jamesmccarty.co.uk. Links will be in the description and in the show notes if you are on audio, both to the single and also to both books that Jim spoke about. Jim, thank you for being so very generous with your time, for figuring out the technology to groove with us today. You've been absolutely amazing. You're a gentleman. You are a rock star. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dan. It's been good. Yeah, you're very bright, Dan. You are some good stuff. It's been a laugh.